It's not certain where in the empire Cassian was born, but we do know that he joined his first monastery in Bethlehem when he was in his 20s with a close friend named Germanus. From there, the two struck out to Scetis and other monastic communities in the Nile Delta, where they spent around 15 years interviewing and learning from monastic elders in the hopes of becoming better practitioners themselves. When Egyptian monasticism became roiled by debates about the teachings of Evagrius, a monk who deeply influenced Cassian's work, though Cassian never speaks of him directly, Cassian and Germanus fled to Constantinople and served in the ecclesiastical entourage of the imperial capital's archbishop, John Chrysostom. But Chrysostom was a divisive figure too, and when he was deposed and exiled only a few years later, Cassian and Germanus travelled to Rome in an effort to defend him. Historians don't know what became of Germanus after that, but Cassian eventually moved to southern Gaul by the 410s at the latest, when he would have been in his 50s. This was no quiet provincial getaway. By the time Cassian arrived in Gaul, political authority at both the imperial and the local levels had been sharply contested in this region for a few decades. Cassian found that the Christians he met there, rich and influential Christians in particular, were hungry for stories of what he'd learned in Egypt, searching, as they were, for moral exemplars and authoritative models of leadership. So, in the 420s, he narrativized the most memorable conversations he'd had with Germanus and their Egyptian mentors and sculpted them into an argument for living ethically, day by day, while coming to terms with one's error-prone, ever-moving mind. This was the Collationes. Given the sheer diversity of monastic models and forms of spiritual authority in late antiquity, it's all the more remarkable that the Collationes, together with Cassian's De Institutis Conebiorum, the foundations of monastic communities, better known as the Institutes, became such influential texts. One hagiographer tells us that Cassian's writings inspired a young North African abbot called Fulgentius to set sail for Egypt in the later 5th century to meet the holy monks whom he already saw as his parents. But he never made it there, his hagiographer tells us. Fulgentius got so excited talking about Cassian's work at a dinner with the Bishop of Syracuse that the bishop persuaded him to stay in Sicily. Another hagiographer noted that by the late 6th century, the abbot John of Réomé had earned the respect of the most powerful people in Gaul, not least because he meditated on the Instituta and the Collationes, especially the books featuring Abba Isaac, and in the process kept his mind from getting distracted. And the Rule of Benedict, a Latin text that eventually became the most popular reference point for monastic discipline in Europe, presented Cassian's work as recommended reading and advised monks to listen to the Collationes after dinner and on fast days. These were times when the mind needed something energizing but not arousing. These are just a few of many examples. Cassian had many admiring readers, though his work, too, was controversial in some circles. His emphasis on lifelong disciplinary practices, behavioral, social, cognitive, as constitutive of an ethical life, left its mark not only on monasticism, but on Christianity more generally. That said, certain elements of Cassian's work never quite entered mainstream medieval psychology, and they might seem as surprising today as they did in the 5th century. Attention in the Collationes. One of the central preoccupations of the Collationes is the art of concentration. This art required many interlocking practices, and the diverse metaphors that Cassian and his interlocutors deploy reflect their sense of monastic practice as a multifaceted system of training. Distraction did not have a single solution, so, like soldiers, monks disciplined themselves to respect chains of command and group norms that could sustain them in combat. Like athletes, monks conditioned their bodies. Like artisans, monks honed skills that were essential to their craft, in their case, reading, memorizing, and above all, monitoring the mind and heart. All these forms of training were necessary because a monk's spiritual growth depended on maintaining functional relationships between self and collective, mind and body, technique and reflection. Concentration on the divine wasn't going to happen simply by resolving to think harder, because a monk's mind was affected by the world in which it was embedded, by the fluctuating constraints of social networks, obligations, physical capacities, emotional states, knowledge, perceptions, and habits. Training across many domains was both ethically and psychologically